Welcome, Mary.
Hey Molly, how's it going?
Good. I don't know if you saw the video last night, the Ilhan Omar video of the attacker. She was so brave. I
Yep.
was like, I was shocked by the way her body language was at that moment. What did you think?
Yeah, well, she is brave. She's been dealing with vicious racist attacks from the president of the United States for years now. And I'm sure because she's quite smart that she's been prepared for a moment like this because that is the inevitable result when the most powerful person, if not on the planet, then certainly in the country, puts you in the crosshairs of his fanatical followers. What I find really troubling is that there seems to be no mechanism to stop him from targeting other Americans from his extremely influential bully pulpit. Obviously, she's not the only person, but he has been hammering on her in particular and Somali Americans in general. I don't know that there's anything that can be done about it, but at the same time, something has to be done about it.
And Maxwell Frost, who's also a member of Congress, who's quite young. He's the youngest member of Congress, I think, or was the second youngest member. He was attacked at Sundance by some crazy.
I actually hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I actually it was reported and then I texted him, and part of this is fear, right? It's using fear to
Mhm.
control voices. I mean, what do you what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very powerful tool, and it's something that Donald and the Republican Party understand, even if only intuitively. They also understand that the more afraid you can make people, the easier it is to shift them into fight mode. Fear doesn't feel good, but it makes people malleable and it makes it easier to make them angry because anger can actually feel very good. So these people are acting out of fear, but it's manifesting itself as anger and sometimes a rage.
It is in like right out of the authoritarian playbook. There was this really excellent piece in the Atlantic about like why it has now tipped into authoritarianism. You know the origin story, you know the principle. I wonder what you think is different about him from the last administration to this one.
I think a number of factors. One, he's declining
Mhm.
emotionally, psychologically, cognitively, and physically. He's old in a way that other people his age are not.
Mm.
Because he's so deeply unhealthy. That makes him more dangerous because on some level, he's aware that he's losing control of himself and the narrative. I mean, we see him in real time losing control of the narrative in Minneapolis,
Mm.
vis-a-vis ICE, and also in the context of the economy. I mean, he can go to Iowa as many times as he wants and lie as many times as he wants. The economy's great and inflation and prices are down. But Americans understand their own lived experiences, and you can only believe your own lying eyes for so long in certain contexts. The other issue, of course, and you've talked about this a lot, is that the other side was very prepared for
Mhm.
uh, his second term. They'd been working. I guess the Republicans do this. They play the long game. There was no
Mhm.
way for them to know whether or not he would get back into the Oval Office, but they planned things as if he would.
Mhm.
So on day one, he'd already gotten rid of the so-called adults in the room to the extent that they were that, people who at least believe to some degree in the constitutional order and American institutions. He had his bullpen of sycophants lined up and ready to go. They had the fascist playbook, Project 2025, ready to go. So I think that explains in part why, and I use the word advisedly, the Trump regime has been so successful
Right.
in breaking everything, and not just in this country, but also, the post World War II order.
NATO. So there's this very good essay in New York Magazine about a very real accounting of Donald Trump's health. Real, put the word real in quotes. You are quoted in this. It's by Ben Terrace. And at one point, he says, my father had the best heart, right? There's a lot of heart health obsession. but at some point, his brain got the and he's forgotten the word Alzheimer's.
Yes.
Say what you want.
Well, first of all, as for hearts, yes, my grandfather was an extraordinarily healthy man, but unlike his son, he didn't drink 12 Diet Cokes a day. I mean, I guess he was sort of sedentary. He was in his office all the time, but as a younger person, like he did manual labor and stuff like that. It was very strong, and comparatively speaking, he wasn't eating McDonald's every day.
Right.
He had sort of the standard American meat and potatoes and vegetables on occasion diet of the 40s and 50s and 60s. So yes, my grandfather was a very physically healthy and long-lived person. He lived to be 93, I think. Um, but my dad, on the other hand, had open heart surgery when he was 39. So clearly there are some issues potentially there. But obviously the thing that is on Donald's mind, even though he doesn't know the word for it, is Alzheimer's. I think you wrote this on Twitter. You're like, the fact that the guy can't remember the word for Alzheimer's, well, that's telling. Um, and, he must, again, very little is conscious with Donald because he's expending so much of his psychic energy protecting himself from actually knowing what's going on with him. But clearly he knows. As I said earlier, he's losing control of himself in the narrative, and he's losing control of himself in that way. He so often can't remember words. He seems not to know where he is sometimes. He
Mm.
can't remember the people he's with sometimes. So it is on his mind and it is a concern. And I think that's partially what drives his occasional forays into discussing the afterlife and God, which is kind of funny to me because he thinks he's the only higher power there
Right.
is. So it's
And
just
legacy
and
too.
yeah, and it's only going to get worse. And yeah, in terms of legacy, that's fascinating as well because he's admitted if he doesn't build these monuments to himself, nobody else will. And I think that's part of like hedging the fears of his own mortality. Again, something about which he has never thought before because a problem for him, which is also a problem for all of us, is I don't know that he believes anything, anyone can or should exist beyond him. He's a
Mm.
nihilist, and, that
Mm.
I think makes him more desperate increasingly.
The nihilism is such an interesting point because we see this like nihilism. It's funny, it's like it reminds me of like this 1980s kind of capitalist nihilism, right? I think of Bret Easton Ellis novels, this
Yeah,
idea that there's not going to be an afterlife. There's not going to be even a life after them. And
right.
so you just got to burn it all down and churn and burn the way that this administration talks about Minnesota. How much do you think that informs his governing style?
Oh, I think the guy, like, still lives in the '80s.
Yeah.
Everything about him screams go, go '80s. I also think, though, that a lot of what you talk about is being replicated, like, among, tech bros, tech oligarchs, etcetera. They all act like it doesn't matter what comes next because they'll have so much money that they can just live in bunkers. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
is that really like, do they don't have any considerations for their children or their grandchildren, or they've convinced themselves that, as long as they're in a luxury bunker, it's fine. And it's kind of fascinating. It's destructive, yes, but it's also really self-destructive.
Right.
And they seem not to have learned any of those lessons. And I think that impetus informs everything Donald does, because the only thing that matters is wealth, because that stands in for everything else. If he has money, he's worth something, like literally in
Right.
figures.
Yeah, I think that's really important. The monuments a really important idea too, but this idea that wealth is the only measure by which you can measure success, which is like a very kind of dynasty. I'm thinking of Dynasty the show, not Dynasty, the dynastic stuff, right? It's a very dynasty idea that you're
Yeah.
measured by your oil fields and your
Yep.
and we do see Trump, like, his obsession with oil, his inability to think in for example, you don't have to be an environmentalist to think that and many of these people are not, to think that nuclear is a better play. right,
Mhm.
than oil. It's
Mhm.
cheaper, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Or it's more expensive to build, but ultimately cheaper. I wonder if we could talk about the anxiety he feels about legacy and about mattering, but also the anxiety he feels about losing it. Because I know I have a parent with dementia,
Yep.
and it makes me very anxious
Mhm. Mhm.
about my good brain.
Mhm.
What do you think about that? What do you see in that behavior?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I'm hoping it skips, if not my whole generation, at least me. That was unkind.
It's a
That's all right. So, an interesting I just wanna say one other thing about legacy because, yes, on the other hand, we see him building monuments to himself, apparently completely unaware that the second he's exited stage left, they're all coming down.
Mhm.
His name will be on nothing
Yeah.
ever, and he doesn't get that. But
Mhm.
what's interesting is he doesn't believe in legacy in the way my grandfather believed in legacy. Like, my grandfather wanted his empire to exist in perpetuity, and he thought that Donald would be the best person to make sure that happened, and as we know, like 3 years after my grandfather died, everything got sold off.
Right.
Everything. There is
Well,
no legacy of my grandfather's. It's all gone. It's all gone.
right.
So, Donald doesn't believe in that kind of he doesn't believe in the dynastic kind of legacy
Right.
because he can't bear the thought that one of his children would succeed him and
Mm.
as in be more successful than or as successful than.
Mhm.
So that part of it's really fascinating. But as for his anxieties over his losing it, I'm guessing that that is what is driving most of his desperation because there's literally nothing he can do about it.
Right.
He can lie to himself, he can change the subject, he can try to distract himself, but yet again, he's going to give a speech that is going to humiliate him and the entire country. He's going to prove to us that he can't hold a thought in his head. He cannot
Oh,
construct an argument that's logical or coherent. He cannot say one thing without drifting off into some weird tangent. And I'm not entirely sure how much longer his people can protect him from that. At the same time, I'm mystified that they keep letting him out in public.
it's amazing. And it's interesting because clearly, the thing I'm struck by 1.0 versus 2.0 is that in 2.0, it really does feel like Stephen Miller is just running the whole White House. Like, the reason that things have gotten so much worse is A, Trump is empowered, but also Stephen Miller is really he's making these decisions.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Trump has some, but I just feel like it feels like, and then when you look at like Venezuela, clearly Marco is doing the foreign adventuring because
Yeah.
Trump 1.0 was no foreign adventuring.
Right.
Trump 2.0 is like, maybe we should get Greenland. Maybe it feels like a sort of loosening of his mind in a way. The few tenets that he had,
Yeah.
like no foreign adventuring, are gone.
Well, because he didn't really believe that.
Right.
It just like he wasn't ever going to release the Epstein files.
Right.
It was a empty campaign promise. All of his campaign promises were empty, either because he had no intention of keeping them or because he's incapable of keeping them, like, fixing the economy or
Right.
ending the Ukrainian war, etc.
On day one.
Day one of the
Day
transition.
one. Day
Woo!
one. Yeah.
Impossible and illegal. It is weird. Like I think these two things are happening in parallel. On the one hand, you're right. Stephen Miller is running the show in the White House. He's driving these immigration enforcement horrors. Rubio is making decisions, certainly in Venezuela and perhaps other places. But Donald is definitely acquisitive in a way he's always been, but it's worse now because why? Well, because the corrupt, illegitimate Supreme Court supermajority gave him almost unlimited power, a truly imperial presidency. He got away with everything, even 34 counts on which he was convicted. Got
Yeah.
away with that. He still hasn't paid E. Jean Carroll a dime.
Uh-huh.
The very, very serious and solid and righteous cases Jack Smith was bringing against him, gone, as if the slate has been wiped clean. Why shouldn't he keep doing what he's always done, push the envelope to see what he can get away with, knowing that he's going to get away with it because he always has? So there is this weird, on the one hand, doesn't seem to be in control. But on the other hand, yeah, he wants Greenland. He wants the Panama Canal. He wants to remove heads of foreign countries who don't subscribe to his particular brand of fascism, et cetera, et cetera. We see what he's done with white shoe law firms and institutions of higher learning, et cetera. So I think, I don't know what can be done about the areas in which he actually is in control or is at least willing to have other people craft a policy in which we take over Greenland. That's tricky. Hopefully, what will stop that is united pushback from the EU and Canada, et cetera.
Mhm.
But I think the simplest way, well, just to put a finer point on that, it's when he runs into reality. That's what's happening with ICE. That's what's happening with the economy. Hopefully, that's what's going to be happening with his imperialistic ambitions. When it comes to something like Stephen Miller, simplest way to get rid of Stephen Miller is to make it very clear to Donald that Stephen Miller makes him look like a puppet. Stephen Miller makes it look like Donald doesn't know anything, isn't in control of anything, and has no power. That's the best. And the fact that people are calling for Miller to be fired, I think it's a good sign because it will bring to Donald's attention this idea that people actually think that Stephen Miller is running the show, which makes Donald look bad and humiliates him.
Yeah, and it also may actually be true. This is one of these times where the right messaging is
Mhm.
also very likely the truth. I mean, we're not in there, but you can see Stephen Miller's handprints on every,
Yep.
from the Nick Shirley video to them going to ICE to stop Somalian refugees who are here legally on refugee programs, to them killing two American citizens and going, they're Antifa, they were agitators. I mean, like at every which way of it. Though I do think the most amazing moment and probably the clearest sign that Trump is having some cognitive issues is when he says you can't have guns.
Well, I mean, and that's again how he keeps painting himself into these rhetorical corners because he needs people to believe, at least the people willing to believe him, that Renee Good and Alex Preddy are responsible for their own death.
Right.
And in the case of Ms. Good, they have a video taken from an angle in which it is not at all clear that her murderer, Jonathan Ross, was not hit by her car, that she
Right.
was not, right? So they have
Right.
that. With Alex Preddy, it's so clear that he was murdered in cold blood, and the only thing they've got is, well, he was brandishing a weapon. He was there to assassinate people, and Donald needs to keep trying to convince people that he deserved it because he had a gun, not recognize this is going to blow back pretty quickly. One, because video evidence contradicts everything they're saying about this killing. Yes, he had a gun because NRA. There's a Second Amendment in this country that that has Republicans trying to tell us that every American, including people with psychiatric illnesses and domestic abusers, should be able to have any kind of gun they want at any time, anywhere, except maybe black people, because they
Right.
don't like that.
Right.
But Mr. Prado was a white man. So it's going to be fascinating to see how he gets out of this one. And that's what I mean. Like he is having a very difficult time hanging on to a clean narrative. It's just not working for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Mary Trump, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly Jong-Fast.